The objective today is I can build a website for political purposes. Short sounding objective, but very dense and with a lot of great opportunities to go as deep as you're interested in. We often will not be able to merge politics and technology in this class, but today we definitely will. So the agenda, you're going to make a website that we'll see if it could be so bad it'll be blocked in North Korea or China. And of course, let's make sure it's appropriate for school. So we're thinking in terms of trying to start a revolution, not any other reason to be blocked. What we have not started in class yet is details about internet policies in foreign countries. So pretty much today is day one in those terms. And we are still currently learning more and more about HTML on a daily basis. So not all cultures are as accepting as America is. Your Think Right Share here is I want you to think about what you know of other countries and come up with basically a two-part list of things that you know are forbidden in some countries and things that you know are acceptable in countries that in America they're just not acceptable or not common at least. So my non-example here is you don't have to stick with just technology. I wrote that in Finland, telecommunication companies are forbidden from keeping internet connection away from anybody. So that's like a common a right they have in Finland. You can't take internet away from people there. So for your Think Right Share, if you wanted to create two tables, you have a forbidden side and an acceptable side. I'm looking for at least 3 examples for each. My example would be women driving in Saudi Arabia. That's forbidden currently as of 2017. Something that's acceptable and common you'll see in France is people kissing when they meet. That's just not as common here in America. It's not to say it doesn't happen at all. All right, so when you're done with that, here is a slide about Britain and France. Something they think is perfectly acceptable is if you get caught freely downloading copyrighted music, they could shut off your internet and shut it off permanently. Something another country did that applies to this class. I mean, in Egypt, the country turned off the internet completely for every single person during the Arab Spring. So because of these protests, they thought it was in the country's best interest to just shut it off completely. So Think Right Share on this subject. Do you think the United States should allow the internet to ever be just turned off? And who's the one to make that decision? The president? And then just tell me why or why not. So welcome to Estonia. In 2001, the E-minded coalition government had started this thing called e-voting. So in order to hold a legally binding election, they allowed their citizens to vote through the internet in 2005 for just a municipal election. And here's some data on that. The number of persons with the right to vote is in the millions. Sorry, I have their Estonian flag blocking here. The votes that actually came in is about 502,000. So the valid ones were in the 496,000 range and invalid 6,000. So we have roughly a 47% voter turnout in Estonia. Number of e-voters, there was only about 9,000 of them. The votes that were counted are 9,287, and apparently there were 30 people who had canceled their vote. Percentage of e-votes among all voters, we're at 1.8%. So I wonder if that number is big enough to make a difference, if that number is big enough to encourage Americans to go to an e-voting system. Your Think Right Shares, do you think Americans should vote like this through their laptops or smartphones? And then a second question here, would the percentage of people voting in general go up or down or stay the same? What do you think if we allowed e-voting to happen here in America? Welcome to China now. So the Great Firewall is a censorship and surveillance project that blocks potentially unfavorable incoming data from foreign countries. It is operated by the Ministry of Public Security. So my challenge for you, what else other than block internet content does China do that's different than Americans? The project was initiated in 1998 and began operations in 2003. It has also seemingly been used to attack international websites using man on the side, DDoS attacks. And one example is GitHub, the Chinese attack to GitHub. Why would anyone want to attack GitHub? So the Great Firewall. Deng Xiaoping's favorite saying is, if you open the window for fresh air, you have to expect some flies to blow in. And so basically a quote like this is what was considered when they established the political and ideological background for this Golden Shield project. The Golden Shield is designed to protect the Chinese from these flies. So think right here, what type of material do you think should be restricted or removed from the internet? So I ask that as just a general question, not necessarily country specific, but here in America, do you think there are things that should not be allowed on the internet? If people are trolling or saying racist, sexist, or bigot comments, should their stuff be removed? Should the extent of what they say be restricted? If there's a car burning on the side of the road and somebody is filming it with their smartphone to put up on YouTube, should that be allowed rather than actually helping the person maybe stuck in the car? Is that okay that they just film it and then post? Or should they be charged with an actual crime if they do something like that? And then obviously murder is not okay, but what if you're watching a murder take place? Should we allow someone to record that and post it on the internet? So these are just some examples. Go ahead and take this question in whatever direction you want to go with. What material should be restricted or removed from the internet? So back to Estonia now. Although the term electronic voting can refer to both voting locations, like going to a booth and using a computer there, in Estonia we're talking about just internet voting, like remotely through the internet casting a vote. How would this concept go over in China? I want you to use your imagination here. So what would be some pros and cons from the Chinese perspective if tomorrow they had decided to end the communist oligarchy and they're going to start holding elections for the general people to vote on political leaders? What would be some pros and cons of just jumping straight to the e-voting system? If you're interested in learning more about Estonia, there's a YouTube video called A Peek into Our Digital Future. I highly recommend that. If you're interested in this topic, you can do additional research by YouTubing VPRO documentaries. They have a lot of good stuff there. Google Bypassing the Firewall, United States Internet Freedom Policy. These are great things to search for and just see where that search can take you. Here's a good quote. China is increasingly doing something even more dangerous with its brand of internet censorship. It's exporting it. So I mentioned at the beginning that North Korea is censoring the internet. Other countries are definitely following behind China and doing it as well. If you want to read more, just Google technical details about the Great Firewall. This will give you some real specifics that you can use. And with that, we're coming to the end of the lesson, so let's choose an IB question to reflect on with any one of these 7 choices. So here's the DOL, and it's okay with me if this turns into about a 2-day project. So after going through this lesson, if you took your time and you did a bunch of additional research, that's perfectly fine. So here on Canvas, I want you to answer in post number 2, what role should the internet play in a country's political landscape? But even more exciting, for number 1, I want you to build a website that can get blocked in China. So I want you to think of your audience, maybe make one where you have Estonia sounding like this amazing place, and it's just all propaganda from your end. You're just really convincing anybody who visits your page to go with this model. If you need additional help starting this, here's what you can do. Go to your GitHub account and you'll create a new repository. So here in mine, maybe I'd call this Agenda because I'm going to make a political agenda one. And yes, to the public, initialize this repository with a README. You should always do that. Alright, so it's being created here. Okay, so don't forget, now that I have this, you can create that new branch where you say GH pages. So create new file. And this will be your index. Oops. So the front of your page. You do your typical stuff here. If you have GitHub connected to your Atom text editor, that's great. Okay, so I'll leave all this. So once you've created the index.html, don't forget to follow the directions I gave before on changing your branch from master to GH pages. That way this is actually accessible to anyone on the internet. Well, anyone except the Chinese, that is. But you know, there's plenty of people in China using something called a VPN, and that's allowing them to escape the restrictions the Great Firewall puts on them.